We are joined today by Paul, the Titan of Terror Tremblay. We'll have to see if that sticks. Probably not. Uh, he's doing his very first middle grade book. We're going to get into that in a second. First question I like to ask all the time: what is your supervillain origin story?
Oh, it's kind of long and boring, but I mean, I'll try to speed it up. Growing up, I wasn't a huge reader. I was a child of cable TV, which came to our town super early. And so I just watched HBO and MASH and all these things. And I wanted to be Larry Bird, which didn't work out. But fast forward, and I was a math major in college. But right after I graduated, and right before I graduated, I took a random English class, which I felt, I really enjoyed, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, bought me Stephen King's The Stand. Um, and so that the combination of those two things turned me into a reader for pleasure, which I really wasn't before. And I went off to grad school for 2 years, and after 2 years of the long distance relationship thing with my now wife, I had a lot more free time. I fell in love with reading, and then I had a weird itch to try writing a story. So it's really kind of hard to explain. I wish I killed somebody or something, but I didn't.
But it sounds like it worked out well for you, and you kind of got stuck in the horror genre right off the bat if you started with King. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, and from King, I branched out and found Peter Straub and Clive Barker and Shirley Jackson and all the hits.
perfect. All right. One thing I also like to ask, just for those who are, authors out there and they never know if they're going to be able to fit this type of stuff in, what does a day in the life of Paul Tremblay look like today?
So I've been a high school math teacher ever since I've started writing. They've always been intertwined. So right now it's summer, so I'm much happier. I don't have a sunburn or anything because it's been kind of rainy here. But so when I'm not teaching, a day in the life looks like I get up and write in the morning, and then do exercises so I don't fall apart because I'm over 50 now. Uh, when I'm at school, it's a little bit different. During the school year, I just try to steal an hour and a half or so during the day, and that could change where it happens. Sometimes, like I used to be really good at writing when the kids were taking a quiz or something, and they could have been cheating their asses off, and I would have no idea. But now that my kids are older, I tend to write at night if it's a school day.
I often wonder. I wonder if your students are like, "Man, we've got Paul Tremblay as a teacher," or if they're just like, "Oh, it's just Paul," because they know you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not the first part. I mean, I at this point I do have posters in my room, of the movie and like the Stephen King when he
Mhm.
tweeted about a head full of ghosts. And actually, my favorite last year was a senior, super smart guy. He just got a 5 in the AP BC calculus exam. First week of the school year, said Stephen King. Is that the guy in the wheelchair? Like, no. To his classmates' credit, everyone else was making fun of him for being
Yeah.
weirdly stupid. Yeah,
But sometimes I also feel like that's not the worst thing not to know
sure.
in the
Yeah,
course of
yeah.
life.
No,
Um,
yeah. I would say the students are a good reminder sometimes. Like if I'm in my own head, like, oh yeah, there's this whole other world, and I'm such a small part of it. It's fun to have that window to that still.
little keep it grounded there, I think.
Yeah,
And last thing I wanted to ask before we start doing a little bit about the book, if you had well, it's kind of funny because you are a teacher. Because I always word this like if you're going to teach a class, but if you're going to
yeah,
teach a class, and I will say this is on author 101, doesn't have to be
yes.
specifically writing, but just things that you wished you'd known, or now that you know that you could tell somebody else, do this or expect this or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question, a hard one too. But so I'll say this: I wish I knew this when I was younger, but I also wish more writers knew that they can say no. They can say no to their editor, uh, and it won't ruin their career. You can fight to keep the title that you want to keep, or anything that happens to be in your book. The older I've gotten and the more I've written, I think that the advice of kill your darlings is terrible advice. If it is so darling to you, you should fight with tooth and nail to save those darlings. You can cut other stuff, but
Right.
yeah, keep the stuff that's important to you.
And that's a good point too. I may be saying the wrong person. I think it was Jen Lyons that said something about I had mentioned one of my favorite characters in one of their books,
Mhm.
and there was like that's the one my editor was trying to get rid of. I'm like, what were they thinking? It's my
Yeah.
Perfect. So I don't because I did read the ebook. I got this here real quick just so everybody can see.
Oh, very
This
nice.
is the book that is coming out. By the time you see this, it'll be coming out tomorrow. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. What prompted you, obviously, to write a middle grade book?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't like a planned career pivot or anything like that. So I mentioned that I've been a high school teacher. I did take 1 year off, a full academic year off sabbatical in 22, 23. That was when the movie Knock at the Cabin was being made, and it came out. That afforded me to take a year off. So in that year, I finished my adult novel very early, horror movie. Finished it like 4 months before deadline. So I'm like, oh, I've got some time. What am I going to do? And then I just fishing around for ideas. I happened to have what became sort of like the core image or scene of the book of a strange old man carrying a burlap sack and knocking at the door of a lonely kid's house. He's like, "Hey, I've got a friend for you," and he opens it up, and inside is this like weird clay mannequin like kid that's alive but has like no facial features, but can sculpt smiles on his face. And I was like, "Oh, I thought that was really weird." At some point during the writing, I figured, "Hey, maybe this is a middle grade novel," just because the protagonist was 12-year old. But I don't know. I don't know if this is the best way to go about a writing career, but I've been going about it by like I'm going to write it and then let someone else figure out what to do with it.
Well, it seems to be working. I actually, again, you said this is a middle grade book. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I finished it up. In fact, I finished it this morning. It was only a couple hundred pages, so I tried not to read it too early, so I'd have
Yeah.
time to forget. But yeah, it was super quick and easy read. I think it fits good in that middle grade book. I feel like there's probably not a lot of, well, let's face it, it's middle grade. There's not a lot of horror books in that
Yeah.
age group, and I think this really fills a need. I also think that the way you wrote it, I mean, for those who care about this type of stuff, there's no cussing, there's no sex, there's no body horror ish. Nothing's
Mm.
going to gross anybody out.
Yeah. No gore. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's really fits in that sweet spot. I would definitely have gotten it for my kids when they were younger. And again, I'm also 50. I'm 54, so I'm also in my
Yeah.
50s. I still enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I would, in fact, we're not gonna spoil anything.
Sure.
It kind of leaves itself open. There could be a sequel if you wanted to go down that path. Don't know if you've planned on it, but
Yeah.
I'm
I
saying
have
you
not.
could.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely open that way, but it just felt sort of natural to the story itself. As a reader, I've never been huge into series. Obviously, I've read a few here and there, but it's actually probably I think the last series I read was Stephen Graham Jones's uh, Angel
Mhm.
Killer Angel Lake trilogy, and
Yep.
before that, I can't remember the last trilogy that I read. So I mean, that just reflects my personal interest. I like bouncing around. So yeah, there's no current plans to write a sequel, but
Okay. I, I
who
just
knows?
know middle
Yeah,
grade. Also they love their sequels in middle grade. What can I say?
they do. Yeah,
You talked about having this guy, and bring up the bag and brings it up to the house. When did you? Because I thought it was an interesting take. When did you decide to put in the telephone? And that's all I'm going to say about that.
yeah. That's a great question. I mean, so it was there in the beginning. I think I figured I needed some of it was like a little bit of a logic experiment. Like, okay, why did this old dude, weird guy show up at the house? I needed sort of like a mechanism for that to happen. At the same time, I was trying to figure out reasons why Casey, who's the 12-year-old, would be feeling so lonely and isolated enough that he would accept sort of this kind of thing. So yeah, when the phone went in, it became a lot more important. I do remember it became a lot more important than it was when I first put it in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love, and you actually did this in the book. I was going to show it to everybody, but I realized that the PDF copy didn't really have a cover. So, um, but you put it in the back of the book in the notes about why you had it in during the COVID period and kind of what that
Mhm.
why he was looking for a friend, that type of thing, which I thought was interesting. I also thought it was very on point for the age group that this is aimed at. Is there anything else that you were looking at or anything that maybe changed from that first part other than, like I said, I do know that the COVID wasn't the original thing, but then you kind of put it there.
Yeah. No, like, and that really grew out of when I mentioned, like, why is Casey feeling so alone? It's like, oh, he was, going to school during, you know, uh, 2021. or the end of 2020 and then early 2021. So in a lot of ways, it's weird. It became sort of the book I didn't know I needed to write to sort of metaphorically deal with like my experiences as a teacher during, the early years of the pandemic. So I mean, for readers out there, like the pandemic's mentioned in like 5% of the pages, if that. I mean,
Right.
95% of the book takes place in Casey's house by himself. So I mean, it's very much sort of like in the background. Um, but just in terms of like how the the feels of the story, as the kids say, uh, I think that what I was trying to sort of replicate, sort of those feelings of uneasiness and and loneliness and weirdness that we all went through.
Yeah, and I won't get into it because we in the story you get to it eventually. You refer to it as the Zoom incident, and I think I kind of actually love the fact that you did that. Is like because as we're reading the book, we're like, okay, what's a Zoom incident? We're waiting to find out what that was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess I won't say too much about, it, but it's also early in the book. But I mean, it does sort of revolve around like a bullying thing that Casey experiences, and you know, students in my school didn't experience the exact same thing, but every school has issues with cyberbullying. So I mean, it was pretty, unfortunately, all too easy to come up with something that seems sort of realistic that the kids are that the students are sort of are dealing with in our wonderful 21st century digital world. Um, yeah, the Zoom incident. Yeah, I think, and even just saying that, I think adults are like, "Ooh, the Zoom incident." I can only imagine what that is.
Yeah, but again, I love the fact that we started out with the name of it, and then eventually it gets revealed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I also think it ties into kind of one of those things that feeds themselves. I know, for instance, I had Richard Paul Evans on, and he's got a little bit of a tick that he's self conscious about.
Mm,
Although I didn't even notice it until he said anything, so it's like it's not super noticeable. But I feel like this thing, and again, this is one of the things that Casey's going through.
right,
Is he's got this little bit of a tick that he gets, but he gets it when he's anxious. But when he starts ticking, then he gets more anxious, and
right,
it's almost becomes a wheel he can't get off.
right. Yeah. Again, like I think as almost all writers do, and especially in that weird time of the pandemic, like so I mentioned some of my teaching and students' experience went into this, but also people in my family and extended family, sort of what they were dealing with, and this I won't say who it is, but there's someone that that a family member that I love, has had gone through that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's like typically what I kind of do as a horror writer. I mean, serve the story first, but I kind of default to even if there's like really strange things going on, I try to hope make it feel as real as possible because those are my favorite kind of horror stories. I mean, Evil Dead 2 is like one of my favorite
Right.
movies, so I mean that's not so realistic, but writing like if I'm going to spend time writing a book, it helps me to try to make it feel real.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So, like again, I won't go into any details, but I do like. I'll say it's. I don't know if it's the afterword. I'll just say it's the final chapter. I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember now if it's the final chapter. But you do kind of have that thing that wraps up some stuff, but also takes the story just a little bit past where we left off, which I enjoyed. Again, that's why I kind of thought maybe we could get a sequel out of this. Again, I won't hold you to it, but if you
yeah,
wrote one, I think it would work. I don't feel like
yeah,
he. I don't feel like this wraps up and like they do like the movie where it's like it did really well. We have to do a book, a movie
right.
too. It's like I don't. You don't have to do a book two.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, of all the books I've written, it's really the one that does sort of leave open to there's another story after this, but I
hmm.
don't know what that story is. And frankly, I'm getting paid a lot more for my adult novels than my middle grade novel.
Well, yeah.
So, maybe once my kids are through college, and
Unless it goes crazy and blows up or
yeah,
something.
right, yeah, exactly.
So did you start out with a name, or was that just a fun tongue in cheek that you named him Morel?
Oh, yeah, I didn't start out with a name. Like when I was looking for a name, I was like, okay, yeah, for the fun tongue in cheek part of
Yeah.
it, for adults especially, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many kids aren't even gonna get that. They're just gonna like, who names their kid this? But
Right.
okay, so again, this is a very short book, which limits the amount of stuff I can talk about without giving anything away.
Yeah, yeah,
What did at what point in the writing process, like again, you came up? I don't feel like we're going to be giving anything away. I
yeah.
wouldn't even say it. I don't want to take a chance. But what point did you decide I'm going to say what Morel was, that background to him.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's a good question. Slightly complicated by, and maybe that's a decent story too. But so I started the book in the spring of 23, and then in mid June of 23, I got a concussion and didn't know I had one. And so, like, for like a month afterwards, I did the worst things you could do with a concussion, like screen time and all that stuff. So
Sleeping.
I kind of wrote like the last probably third of a novel in a concussed blur. um, that said, though, I think you know early on I did sort of work out what I thought a moral was made of, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I think that was pretty early. I didn't outline the book, but I took like a lot of notes. And I usually do like a lot of notes for the characters before I sort of really like dive in. I will say this book, compared to some other ones, like I usually have like an ending in mind, and this one, like it was, I really didn't know what the ending was going to be until like much later in the book, which was different. It was actually both nerve wracking and kind of exciting at the same time.
Gotcha. I will say for the adults out there who are trying to get their kids to read, the fact that you can A, tell them that this is a horror novel, and B, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but it's less than 250 pages long. This is not a thick book.
Yeah, no,
This
it's
shouldn't
like
scare anybody off.
right. I mean, page wise, it might be in the 200s, but it's like it's big font. It was like 47,000 words. I tend to think in words because I still
Yeah.
write all my stuff in Microsoft Word. And most of my adult novels are like 80,000. So, it's like almost a short novel for sure.
Yeah, that's always a fun disconnect on authors because every author, not just you, it's like 80,000 words, 100,000 words, 75,000.
Yeah.
And the readers are like, but how many pages is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I
That's
know.
all we see.
And like some really amazing artwork by Sam Wolf Conley. That was actually something I'm sure they probably would have done it anyway, but like in the negotiation process, that was something I asked for at the end is like, uh, I'll give on this point, but if I do, then like I want this book to be illustrated. And
Yeah, the
they were
ebook did
super
have a
excited to do
couple of
it.
those in there, so I got to see some of them.
Yeah. Um, in the hardcover, which I've seen, I don't have in front of me because I'm a donkey. But in the hardcover, like the art looks amazing. They really high resed it up. I mean, it's all black and white, but it's. I think it definitely adds to the reading experience. I think.
Yeah, perfect. So loved it. And again, that's another thing you mentioned, it is not. There is a difference between the mass market paper books where somebody decides that they have to put like 300 lines on each page, and this is much bigger. And again, I think that also helps because I think that goes towards the age group that it's sent towards. I feel like they
Yeah,
are expecting to have a little bit more space on the page than
for
some.
sure. Yeah. No,
Um,
I mean, not that I'm an expert in middle grade. I haven't read. I have to confess, I haven't read a ton. Um, a friend of mine, I probably should mention this when you asked about like where the book came from. Part of it also just came from a few years ago. A writer, Mallory O'Mara, who wrote the great book called "The Lady from the Black Lagoon." It's nonfiction and it's about the woman who secretly, not sort of secretly, because history sort of buried her, designed the original Gilman suit. Um, anyway, wonderful book. Highly recommend it for any horror fans. Into nonfiction. Anyway, I saw her in an event. She was like, "Paul, you have to read this book. It's called The Nest by Kenneth Apple." I'm like, "Oh, okay." She's like, "It's middle grade, but it's really scary and it's great." And I don't know. I'm sure you do too. Get a lot of book recommendations, but Mallory went so far as to actually physically mail me a copy of the books. I'm like, "Oh, well, I better read it then."
yeah,
And I
nice.
read it, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do this in middle grade." I mean, it was just because I don't know. In my head, middle grade was more like kind of like fun stories, like sort of Scooby Doo esque in a way, like like you described. It's kind of safe. And no, The Nest was terrifying, and it was beautifully written. And I thought it really went into some really interesting, murky, tough places. So with The Nest sort of rattling around in my head. When I had the clay sort of boy image, I would say those two things helped push me into thinking, okay, maybe I could try my hand at writing a middle grade.
Perfect. Odd question. I don't normally ask this, but you talked about the fact that you got done with a book like 4 months early, so you wrote this. How long did this book actually take you to write?
So yeah, I started it, let's say like February or March of 23, and I finished it in like August.
Wow.
So it's pretty short. Normally my adult novels take me like 12 to 15 months to have like a full draft that I turn in. Um, yeah. So I mean, that August counts as like, me giving it to my agent and him trying to sell it. I mean, there was definitely some time spent with once we had a deal, and I had like probably spent another couple weeks with the editor, going through it and stuff like that. But it was pretty quick.
Did you find, and you can skip this one if you want, I'll cut it out. But did you find that you had any difficulties selling a book that wasn't quote unquote your wheelhouse?
Um, no, luckily I didn't. My agent does have plenty of experience with YA and middle grade, and really, um, what I wanted, my hope was to stay in house. Like William Morrow is my publisher for my adult novels, and it's an imprint of HarperCollins. So I was really kind of hoping to stay in house, because that means a lot to me. I think just having all the books in one place
Mhm.
just makes it better, and makes more. You're working with similar people. Uh, that want to reinvent the wheel and like go somewhere else. With a new book. So my agent probably, if he has given truth serum, probably would have wanted to go out wider with it. But I found value in like staying inside. Now, in the other part that worked out super well, my adult editor is a friend, the one who saved my career, and like a fairy godmother, and she helped shepherd the book over to Rosemary Brennan at Quill Tree Press, who's an amazing editor. So I mean, I knew I would have like already sort of like built-in safety support stuff. The one thing I was surprised about was when I turned it in, I started hearing from like the industry people like, "Oh no, middle grade horror is bad. No one wants it." I was like, "What?" Because I felt like I'd been seeing like Chuck Wendig put books out, and Ali Melenchenko,
Right.
or I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name, Malenko. So that was a little bit of a shock or a surprise to hear. I was like, "Oh, I thought I was like on the cutting edge of like hot new, hot I don't know, hot new market thing." But it worked out.
There's some out there. I feel like the industry, and I'm not calling out anybody in the industry, but I feel like the industry changes slowly in one sense, but then when something does become hot, they like go full in.
Right.
And you go back 5 or 6 years ago, what the heck was romantasy? So
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
was you can't do both.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I've seen a lot of ones where an author will get a little bit of pushback when they want to go outside their lane, for lack of a better word, and then it'll be something like William Kent Kruger's Ordinary Grace, which becomes his like best-selling book, but they wanted another Cork O'Connor mystery. Instead, they got his best-selling book. So hey,
Yeah. No, that's all right. I mean, one lucky. I mean, it was horror, so I felt like probably genre adjacent, and I'm also super lucky that my editor and publisher allows for me to have like a wide definition of what horror could be, or what it is, and gives me like a lot of leeway. Um,
nice.
yeah, and I'm going to hold them to that with
Perfect,
this
perfect.
new book that I turned in. We'll see.
So I'm going to go a little generic on this last one
Sure.
because again, this is such a short book, and there's only so many things we can talk about without. I don't want to spoil it for
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
who's reading it. Is there anything about? Well, I guess I didn't even give the gist of the story, but is there anything about the story that you'd want to say that we didn't touch on, just so that people kind of have an idea if they want to pick this up?
Um, I don't know. I'm so bad at like trying to not sell my own book, but pitch it. But I will say this like. Uh, when I wrote it, like I didn't really approach it like, oh, I'm writing a middle grade novel. It happened to be a 12-year-old protagonist, so there was no swears. Maybe there was no swears. That was the only thing I took out. But the rest of the stuff wasn't there because the story didn't necessitate it. Like I didn't feel like, oh, this is a totally new writing hat. I wrote it like I would have written any other book, uh, and hopefully to me that means um, that like I respect the reader's emotional intelligence, whether they're 10 or 50, and the same with the characters too. I don't know, because those tend to be sort of my favorite stories. Even works for like younger readers. And I mentioned The Nest. I think The Nest does that amazingly well, where it's like, no, like you're treating, even though they're not adults, you're treating these readers with the same respect that you would afford an adult, if that makes sense.
Right. Because I will say, at least from my point of view, it kind of gave me some of the same vibes I've seen in some more adult horror novels, but maybe you just dialed back the dark a hair. So hopefully we're not giving anybody nightmares.
Yeah.
But it read really, like I said, it really read to me like, especially among some of the short stories I've read of what are considered full-grown adult horror stories. So
Yeah.
again, I
Well, thank
liked it,
you.
and I think it's almost anybody of any age can read it.
That's the hope. Please, adults, buy this book. You're the only people I can market to directly. Which
Yeah,
may, obviously I can't go
well,
to
yeah.
14-year-olds' houses and be like, "Hey, buy my book." Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be caught standing on the corner in a trench coat. It's like, I got a paperback right here.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, looks a little awkward. Uh, Gonna go off a little off topic on this one, other than buy the book, but I
Yeah.
do have to ask this one question for you, and you can answer it however you want, or you can not answer it.
Okay.
But let's find out about the chair chucking incident.
Oh, the damn Langan, John Langan. So, all right. I met John Langan and a few other of my dear like writer friends like Michael Sisko and a bunch of other people at this convention called ReaderCon, sort of like
Mhm.
a small Boston regional speculative fiction conference or convention. And anyway, this was like, geez, 2000. Well, I think this wasn't the first con that I met him at. So this was probably like 2008 ish or something. We were playing the party game Mafia. Do you know Mafia?
Only because I've already heard this story, but I still
Oh,
thought I'd enjoy asking you about it.
yeah. Well, for anyone listening who doesn't know Mafia, I mean, you could look it up, but it's a fun game where you could play at a party with any number of people, or some people are quote unquote mafia, some people are the village. And basically, you try to figure out who's lying. Uh, and in gameplay, the mafia kill people, so people start disappearing. Anyway, I had figured the game out. We were down to like 5 people. And I'm a competitive bastard. I will freely admit that when it comes to games. Um, so if I actually threw the chair, I would fully admit it. So this is the only reason I get fired up about this is because it's not accurate. If it
Mhm.
was accurate, I would claim it. Because I'm going to side story here. When I first learned this game, I took it to my school and played it with my senior calculus people a lot. And there was one time, it was during finals week, so kids were just blowing off steam. Had a big group. I held up the game because some like hockey player was coming in from practice and he wanted to play. So I held up the game. We played the first round. I knew that he voted me out, and I was so upset. But I didn't want to like divulge the secret if I knew who kicked me out. I actually dove out my first floor window. I opened the window and like jumped out and ran around like screaming. So anyway, I'm capable of throwing a chair, but I did not. What had happened at ReaderCon? I've already derailed the story. But what happened at ReaderCon? I got voted out, even though I was villager, and I was correct at who was mafia. So very athletically, I might add, I stood up and straightened my legs so that the backs of my legs would knock the chair over.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that again. It was a very athletic maneuver. I'd never actually picked up the chair and threw it. I stood up and just basically bucked the chair over.
Yep. No, I get it. It's one of those stories, and even the person I heard it from is one of those things where you have friends, and of
Oh,
course,
look at
every
you
time.
protecting who told the story. Yeah.
Oh,
No, go
I
ahead.
can tell you who I've said in a second, but I heard it on a podcast. But
Mm.
the fact that they even mentioned though is the fact that as friends do every time this story gets told, the chair probably goes a little farther.
I think right away, John instantly has just been retelling the story over and over again that I threw a chair, like because it comes up every time we're in person.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I actually heard it. There's a podcast with Matthew Kressel, who's been on,
Okay.
and David Mercurio, who has
Oh
not been
yeah,
on.
they're mafia guys. Yeah.
Yep, and they talked about it. Oh, by the way, anybody young who's still trying to figure out what Mafia is, if you play video games, it's Among Us. If
Mm.
you've played Among Us, that's Mafia.
There's also like I've seen a lot of kids play a variant called Werewolf, and they actually make cards. It's
Oh,
basically it's mafia, but just replace it with like a werewolf. But anyway, yeah,
yeah. Among Us is one of those ones that everybody on Twitch was playing for a
yeah,
couple of
yeah, yeah.
years. So I thought they might recognize that even if they didn't recognize Mafia.
Mm.
Uh, but okay, so I'm sorry. I just had to ask about that. I heard this.
That's great.
Because kind of the joke is too at my house, we had one time we were driving across country and a tire blew. My wife was driving, and so it started to skid a little bit, and she got it back under control. And then the second tire on the same side blew,
Oh no.
so we went sliding off, the interstate down an embankment. Luckily, it was out in
Yeah.
the middle of nowhere, so it's not like a guardrail or anything. But of course, as me and my kids do every time we tell that story, the car flips one more time. So it's like rolled
Yeah.
47 times now, and it never flipped over in the first place.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah. So,
it
geez.
it,
I
it
mean,
gets
it's
fun out of it.
terrifying anyway. But
No, I remember it's one of those weird things too, where I didn't know this was really a thing, but people talk about like when stuff happens, everything goes in slow motion.
Mm,
I remember sliding off the side of the road and thinking, okay, we're going to flip over, but it's going to be okay. The kids are in the seat. They're all seat belted. We might be
mm,
upside down, but it's not going to be a big. I had this entire conversation in my head before we slid to a stop. Um, so, yes, it does really happen. Things do go in slow motion
mm.
sometimes. All right. Obviously, what are you working on now that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I just turned in my next adult novel, and sort of the book deal was just announced in PW recently. So the novel is going to be called "Dead but Dreaming of Electric Sheep."
I
Um,
heard about that now that you say it.
yeah, so it's sort of like a mix of sort of like a. I tried to describe it as imagine if the Coen brothers had written or directed, or I will say written because it's a book, written sort of like a science fiction horror road novel. Uh,
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm hoping there's some humor to it. There's some AI science fiction and of course some horror too.
Well, I'm a sucker for AI robots and cyborgs, so I will probably be picking that one up.
Right on.
Yeah, I'm not a huge sci-fi style. I don't like the big war space operas and stuff like that. But
Yeah, same.
you give me a rogue robot or AI, and I'm all in. All right. What are you reading right now, other than yourself,
Uh, I'm looking
if
around the room.
anything?
I just started reading. I wish I could remember. I'm so bad at the title. Oh, I just finished. It's over there. I just finished reading a short story collection called "You Glow in the Dark" by Liliana Koyanzi. South American writer. Sorry, I'm forgetting which country exactly. And it was really strange and wonderful collection. It's short, and a lot of them sort of deal with like ecological disaster, but tinged with like some weird, almost horror stuff. Yeah, it's weird and dreamlike. And I just started Megan Abbott's new book. I've been also in the midst of reading for research for the next novel that's due a year from now. Some of that involves the occult. So I hope I don't accidentally set off some spells. If I do, apologies to those affected.
I always feel a little bit bad for authors. You get on one of these things and you got to talk about a book that you finished writing almost a year ago. It's like,
Yeah.
what was that again?
No, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Exactly. Like I finished writing another, like at least in the draft form, almost exactly 2 years ago. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've written, this big, we're talking word numbers earlier. The, the new novel I just turned in was 125,000 words or 440 pages, by far my longest book. I did not anticipate it to be that long. Or I didn't think it was going to be that long at the start.
Yeah, I never hold it against an author who's looked at me and said, "Did I write that?"
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's like you've got that book from 2 years ago, you've got another book you've written, you've got a book you're working on, and you're trying to keep them all straight. All right. One other question I like to ask just for funsies:
Mhm.
is there anything other than writing? Obviously, you're a math teacher.
Yeah.
You said math, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, is there anything that you have a hobby, an interest, something that you like to talk about once in a while? So somebody will talk to you about something besides books.
Well, I'm a hack guitar player. Um, I don't know how interesting that is to talk about, but I'm also like and actually this I usually avoid talking about because the people in sort of the writing circles aren't sports fans, but I'm a huge sports fan, sports dork, really. Well, that's my escape. Like, what? I love reading. I read to be
Mhm.
me, but I'm reading to become a better writer. Like if I want to shut my brain off, I watch sports. That's just how I like, that's my comfort. I consume way too much local Boston sports radio and stuff like that. Yeah.
Sometimes you
So,
just need to be able to yell at the TV.
oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right. What else? I think that was most of it. So I'm going to give you the wrap up question. I ask this of everybody. Shout out to a brick and mortar bookstore of your choice.
Oh, always love to give a shout out. Well, I mean, can I give a couple?
Yeah.
So one is the Brookline Booksmith, which is in Boston, or Brookline. Brookline's like a part of Boston. It's kind of confusing. Um, that was the bookstore I went to my first ever author reading, like way back in the early 2000s. So that place has always seemed like magic to me. So I pretty much always make sure that when I have a book coming out, I do my first event there, just almost as like a fun tradition. But I would also like to shout out Copper Dog Books in Beverly, Massachusetts. That's a town I grew up in. It's a relatively new store, but they're killing it up there. And to maybe bookend it a little bit when we talked about the pandemic with another, they had opened probably only like a few months, maybe even less than a year before 2020 happened. And my mom, who lives in the same town, she has COPD, and she couldn't be risking anything, especially at the start. But the owner of the store, Meg, was just so kind. Like, when I ordered a bunch of books because my mom was going to be sort of by herself in her apartment, Meg delivered them to her apartment and offered to get her groceries and stuff, which she didn't need. But it's just, there's so many of these local bookstores. That's what they're part of the community, and they act like they're part of the community, and that's definitely the case in both Copper Dogs and Brookline Booksmith's cases.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was actually, at the time, I was still working at the Bookworm here in Omaha when the
Mm.
COVID hit. And so we started, things we would have never thought of, curbside pickup. Some
Right.
of our elderly customers, we'd actually drive it to their house and stuff. So
Yeah.
it was,
Thank you for doing that.
it was a weird time. It was
Yeah.
definitely a weird time. All right. So I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Anything that you'd want to talk about other than what we already talked about?
Um, can I swear?
Yeah.
Fuck AI. Like, I hope everybody who's listening is not using ChatGPT or any sort of like Midjourney or that stuff, because it's bad. It's all bad. There's no good. Fight it for as long as you can. There's
And it
no there's no
doesn't
ethical there's
work.
no ethical way to use it currently, as it's all built off of stolen books, stolen art, and it's just ruinous for the environment. So sorry. Yeah.
No, no, my thing is it doesn't work because a lot of times now, if you try to do a Google search, even it'll give you that AI answer first.
Yeah. You can, for anyone out there, if you don't want that to pop up, type in your normal Google search and write dash AI, and it'll
Oh, okay.
exclude
So
the AI. Yeah.
I just noticed I was looking up a local author, Tosca Lee, had a new book coming out next year, and so I tried looking up what it was, and the AI told me all about this book, but it's by someone else.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
because it was like book three in a series, and I'm like, I haven't read everything Tosca has written, but I think I remember that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. AI is not. We need, if they're going to do AI, it needs to like clean my house for me, not write a
Right.
book for me.
Exactly.
I need Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. That's what I need.
That's in my novel, Den, but Dreaming of Electric Sheep. There is definitely a Rosie the robot reference.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I will get that if nobody else does.
Yeah.
All right. So, Paul, I just want to thank you for your time. Again, anybody who's watching this, if you've got young kids or if you just want to read it yourself, this book was very, very good. I just finished it today. I will get a review out for it. Also, if you're watching this, there will be links down in the description, not only to any book that was mentioned, but also to all of the bookstores that were mentioned as well. So, Paul, thank you for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah. Thank you for saying, for reading and enjoying the book. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right.